Emily adjusted the lace collar of her simple dress, trying to calm the fluttering in her chest. Tonight, she and her husband David were going to dinner at his mother Margaret's apartment again, and every visit felt like a test she wasn't sure she could pass. Margaret was a woman who valued luxury, status, and control above all else, and from the very first moment she had made it clear that Emily, a simple girl from a small town, did not belong in her world. David noticed the tension in Emily's shoulders and gently took her hand, whispering, "Don't worry, everything will be fine." Even in his voice, however, there was uncertainty. The apartment was vast and opulent. Expensive furniture gleamed under the light of crystal chandeliers, paintings in gilded frames hung on the walls, and everything around them spoke of wealth and refinement. Emily felt painfully out of place, a modest country girl swallowed whole by the grandeur around her. Margaret's gaze swept over them as they entered the living room. "So, you came," she said, her tone icy and without a hint of warmth. "David, did you at least explain to your wife how to behave at the table?" David's eyes flickered nervously toward Emily. "Mum, I just want everything to look proper," Margaret interrupted sharply. "Last time, she spilled sauce on the tablecloth. Honestly, Emily, you could use a lesson in manners." Emily felt the heat rise to her cheeks and forced herself to stay calm. She loved David. She wanted to make him proud, yet Margaret seemed determined to undermine her at every step. They moved into the dining room, where the table was laid with sparkling silverware, delicate china, and exquisite dishes. Emily sat down and tried to make herself small, to go unnoticed. Margaret, never one to miss an opportunity, leaned back and smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "So, Emily, how is your town? Still milking cows?" David frowned. "Mum, please." "I'm just curious," Margaret replied lightly, as if asking a harmless question. "Life there must be so dull, so monotonous, no culture, no entertainment." Emily clenched her fists beneath the table. "It's peaceful," she said softly. "Fresh air, kind people." "Kind people are all well and good," Margaret said with a faint smirk, "but kindness isn't enough. You also need education, social polish, and status." And then came the words that made Emily's chest tighten so much she thought she might collapse. "You know, Emily, my cleaning lady is sick. Why don't you call your mother from the country? Let her come and work here as my maid." A frozen silence filled the room. David's mouth opened, but no words came. Emily felt the sting of tears threatening to fall. She wanted to scream, to protest, but instead she took a steadying breath, lifted her head, and said in a calm, composed voice, "Okay, I'll call her." Margaret's confident expression faltered. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. For the first time, she wondered if this marriage was even worth it. She called her mother. "Mum, she humiliated me again." Her mother, Nancy, listened quietly, letting Emily pour out her frustration, her anger, and her tears. When Emily finished, there was silence. Then Nancy spoke with gentle authority. "Don't worry, honey, I'll come." Emily's eyebrows rose in surprise. You're coming?" "Yes, sweetheart, trust me." Emily hung up, feeling a mixture of relief, confusion, and a strange reassurance. The next morning, Margaret paced the apartment, confident that the country woman arriving would be meek, humble, and timid. She imagined Emily's mother entering in old clothes, ready to work silently, submissive, a figure that could be easily dominated. The doorbell rang, and Margaret went to answer it, a smug smile playing across her face. She opened the door and froze. Standing there was not a timid maid, but an elegant, self-assured woman in a tailored suit, her hair perfectly styled, sunglasses perched on her head, and her nails perfectly manicured. "Hello," the woman said calmly, removing her sunglasses. "My name is Nancy. I'm Emily's mother." Margaret's face went pale. You're the maid?" Nancy lifted one brow, a small, knowing smile on her face. "No, I'm the owner of a large farming business." Emily and David stepped behind her, Emily barely suppressing a smile, David utterly shocked. Margaret could not believe what she was seeing. She had prepared for a humble, submissive woman, not someone radiating confidence and authority. Nancy walked inside, calmly surveying the lavish surroundings. "A beautiful place," she said politely, her tone neutral. "But I prefer nature. The air is cleaner, and the people are kinder." Margaret's smug satisfaction began to crack. Nancy took a seat, her presence commanding without a hint of aggression. "I didn't come here to argue or to show off," she said firmly. "I came to protect my daughter. She is kind, hard-working, and deserving of respect. I will not allow anyone to humiliate her, especially not in her own home." Margaret opened her mouth to defend herself, but found no words that could counter Nancy's calm authority. Nancy continued, her tone steady. "I am not opposed to helping with chores, but any work deserves fair pay. Let's agree on that before anything else." Margaret felt a sinking feeling in her chest. She was used to controlling every situation with money, influence, or intimidation, but now her tools were powerless. For the first time in years, Margaret saw the shift of power in the room and realized she had lost it. David, who had been silent until now, stepped forward and spoke firmly, his voice unwavering. "Mum, Emily is my wife and I love her. You will respect her." Margaret's composure faltered completely. Her carefully maintained facade of superiority crumbled under the weight of David's resolve and Nancy's calm authority. Emily, standing beside her mother, felt a wave of relief and quiet triumph. Finally, the tension that had haunted her for years began to lift, replaced by a feeling of dignity restored. Margaret's eyes dropped to the floor. She realized that her arrogance, prejudice, and attempts to control her daughter-in-law had led her to this humiliating position. She understood, perhaps too late, that respect cannot be demanded through fear or wealth, but must be earned through fairness and humility. The room was quiet for a moment, the silence thick with the recognition of a power shift. Emily's mother, Nancy, did not gloat, did not display anger. She simply sat with quiet authority, showing Margaret that a calm, intelligent, and principled approach had far more influence than intimidation. David looked at Emily, a mixture of relief and newfound respect in his eyes. Emily, for her part, stood tall, no longer feeling small or unworthy in the luxurious surroundings, confident that she had allies she could trust, and that she would no longer be undermined by her mother-in-law. Margaret attempted to speak, her voice shaky. I didn't mean—" Nancy interrupted gently but firmly. "I know what you think about my daughter. You consider her a simple country girl, unworthy of your son. But let me tell you something. Emily is one of the kindest, most honest, and hard-working people I know. She loves your son. She cares for your family, and if you cannot recognize that, the fault is yours alone." Margaret had no reply. Her high-handedness, her disdain, and her prejudices had turned against her, leaving her speechless and forced into humility. The lesson was clear, and the balance of power in the family had shifted irrevocably. Emily took her mother's hand, feeling her reassurance and love, her heart swelling with quiet pride. She realized that no amount of wealth or arrogance could diminish her self-worth when supported by family who truly cared. David, observing all of this, finally understood the strength his mother-in-law could never match, and the courage and dignity that Emily and Nancy brought to the room. Emily returned with a tray of tea, placing cups on the table with careful hands, her movements calm and deliberate. She sat beside her mother Nancy, who gave her a reassuring smile. Margaret, still pale and stunned, tried to compose herself, but her attempts at control were now futile. I thought you would be— I mean, you are not who I expected, Margaret stammered, her voice faltering. Nancy's smile remained composed and calm. I am not here to prove anything, she said evenly. I am here to support my daughter. You see, appearances can be deceiving, and true character cannot be judged by clothes, accent, or upbringing. Margaret could only lower her eyes, feeling the shame of her previous arrogance and prejudice. Emily, feeling emboldened by her mother's presence, spoke softly but firmly. I'm not here to be a servant. I live, I work, I care for our home and for David. If something isn't done properly, it can be addressed respectfully, but I will not be humiliated. Nancy leaned slightly forward, her gaze steady on Margaret. Any work deserves respect and fair payment. That is how we treat people. That is how Emily deserves to be treated. Margaret swallowed hard. Her mouth opened to reply, then closed again. For the first time, she felt the weight of her own arrogance reflected back at her. David stepped forward, his voice firm yet calm. Mum, Emily is my wife. I love her, and I will not allow her to be treated disrespectfully. Please show her the respect she deserves. Margaret's hands trembled slightly. She had spent years dictating how others should behave, using wealth and authority to dominate, but now all her tools had failed. Emily felt a swell of quiet satisfaction, not from revenge, but from the restoration of dignity and fairness. She looked at David and nodded, silently thanking him for finally standing by her side. Nancy added in a measured tone, We are not here to fight, but to set things right. Judging someone by their background or status is a weakness, not a strength. Margaret nodded slowly, her pride bruised, her arrogance subdued. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the tension in her chest ease. She realized that the fear and anxiety she had carried in her heart during every visit to Margaret's home could be replaced with confidence, now that her mother and husband stood with her. Margaret finally spoke, her voice quieter, less commanding. I understand. I will try to change. Emily's eyes softened slightly, recognizing a small but meaningful shift. Nancy nodded approvingly. That is all anyone can ask. Respect, kindness, and understanding take time to learn, but it begins with honesty and humility. The room grew calmer, the earlier tension giving way to a tentative peace. Emily and David exchanged a glance, a mutual understanding passing silently between them. Emily felt a sense of victory, not in dominance but in fairness restored. Margaret, still seated, now faced the reality that she could no longer dictate behavior through fear or wealth. She understood that the strength and dignity of Emily and Nancy had shown her a lesson she would not forget. The tea sat steaming on the table, a small symbol of calm and domestic order after the storm. Emily sipped hers quietly, feeling warmth and reassurance in every sip. David placed his hand gently over hers, offering a silent promise of protection and partnership. Margaret, humbled, nodded again. She had learned that controlling people with arrogance and wealth could never achieve what calm authority, fairness, and integrity could. Emily finally allowed herself to smile, feeling supported, respected, and loved, the shadow of humiliation lifting as dignity and understanding filled the space. In the days that followed, Emily and David returned to their apartment feeling a sense of relief and quiet strength. The tension that had haunted Emily for years seemed to dissipate, replaced by a newfound confidence and self-assurance. David, having witnessed his mother's humiliation and Emily's dignity, became more attentive and protective of his wife. He asked about her day, listened to her thoughts, and included her opinions in decisions, as if trying to compensate for all the times he had been too passive before. Margaret, on the other hand, retreated into a reflective silence. She began to understand the weight of her words and the consequences of her arrogance. For the first time, she experienced the discomfort of realizing that wealth and status do not guarantee respect or loyalty. One evening, a few days after the incident, the phone rang. Emily picked it up. It was Margaret. Her voice was hesitant, almost shy. "Emily, I wanted to apologize. I was wrong. I am ashamed of my behavior. I understand if you cannot forgive me, but I needed to say it." Emily paused for a moment, processing the sincerity in her voice. "I appreciate your apology," she said carefully, "but I need time. This cannot be forgotten instantly." Margaret responded quietly, "I understand. I only want you to know I am truly sorry." Emily hung up the phone feeling a mixture of relief and caution. She turned to David, who had been silently observing. "She apologized," he whispered. Emily nodded. "Yes, she is aware of her mistake." In her small town, Emily sat with her mother Nancy in the kitchen of their family home. They drank tea and discussed the events, the warmth of home offering a stark contrast to the cold luxury of Margaret's apartment. "So, honey," Nancy said softly, "how is your mother-in-law doing now? Is she trying to make amends?" Emily smiled slightly, feeling a quiet triumph. "Yes, Mom. I think she understands now. Respect is not bought with money. It must be earned through kindness, honesty, and decency." Nancy nodded approvingly. "Exactly. And never forget, my daughter, you are worthy of that respect. Always remember your value, and do not allow anyone to undermine it." Emily felt a deep sense of gratitude and strength. She had faced humiliation, she had stood firm, and she had been supported by those who truly cared for her. In her heart, she knew that she had won not by force, but by dignity, integrity, and courage. David joined her at the kitchen table, taking her hand gently. "Emily, I'm proud of you," he said, his voice full of respect and love. Emily squeezed his hand, feeling the bond between them strengthened. She realized that despite the challenges, they had weathered the storm together, and that their partnership was stronger than ever. The days that followed were quieter, more peaceful. Margaret gradually adjusted her behavior, showing small acts of consideration and respect, aware that Emily and Nancy's example had revealed the true power of integrity. Emily, meanwhile, moved through her life with confidence, no longer weighed down by fear of judgment or humiliation. The love of her husband and the unwavering support of her mother gave her the certainty that she belonged, that her dignity was intact, and that she could face the world with her head held high. And in the quiet moments, sipping tea in the warmth of her home, Emily reflected on the journey she had endured, the struggles, the humiliation, the confrontation, and finally the triumph of dignity and respect. It was a lesson she would carry with her forever, a reminder that courage, integrity, and the support of loved ones can overcome even the most oppressive arrogance. In the following weeks, life returned to a calmer rhythm. Emily and David's home became a sanctuary of peace and understanding. David had grown more assertive, consistently standing by Emily's side whenever his mother tried to assert control or criticize. He no longer avoided confrontation, but approached it with calm firmness, a protective strength that had previously been missing. Margaret gradually began to reflect on her behaviour. She realized that authority, wealth, and social standing meant little if used to belittle others. Small gestures of acknowledgement began to appear, a polite greeting, a measured tone when speaking to Emily, and occasionally genuine curiosity about her thoughts and experiences. Emily noticed these changes but remained cautious, understanding that old habits die slowly. One afternoon, Nancy came to visit, carrying herbs from her farm and a warm smile. "Emily, it's good to see you," she said, setting the basket on the kitchen table. Emily hugged her mother tightly, grateful for the unwavering support that had guided her through the past tense days. David joined them, sitting close to Emily, his hand resting lightly on hers. "Mum, I want you to meet Nancy properly," he said. Margaret, invited for tea, arrived later. Her posture was stiff, but her expression carried a hint of humility. She had come prepared to acknowledge her errors, no longer with arrogance, but with the tentative respect Emily and Nancy had earned. "Emily," Margaret said quietly, her voice softer than before, "I wanted to thank you and your mother. I've been wrong. I understand that respect cannot be demanded, only earned." Emily nodded, keeping her tone gentle. "Thank you, Margaret. That means a lot. I hope we can move forward with understanding and respect." Margaret offered a small, tentative smile. "Yes, I hope so." The atmosphere, once tense and fraught with control and humiliation, slowly transformed into one of civility and cautious reconciliation. Emily felt a deep sense of relief, knowing that her dignity was no longer threatened and that the bond with her husband was stronger than ever. David squeezed her hand, a silent promise of partnership and protection. In the quiet moments that followed, the family shared tea, conversation, and moments of tentative warmth. Margaret began to see Emily not as a simple country girl, but as a woman of strength, integrity, and character. She realized that the love between Emily and David was genuine and deserved her respect. Emily, with Nancy's steady support, felt empowered. She knew that challenges might arise again, but she was equipped to face them with grace, confidence, and the unwavering support of those who truly loved her. Days turned into weeks, and Emily found herself moving through life with a sense of restored balance and dignity. The lessons of humility, courage, and integrity lingered in every action, shaping a household now defined by mutual respect rather than fear and dominance. Evening light streamed through the windows as Emily and David sat together, reflecting on the changes. "I love you," David whispered. "I'm proud of you, Emily. I will never let anyone treat you otherwise again." Emily smiled, leaning into him, feeling secure, respected, and cherished. Margaret, observing silently, understood that the dynamics of control had irrevocably shifted. She had learned a difficult lesson about arrogance, judgment, and humility. And as Emily and David enjoyed the quiet comfort of their home, they knew that their partnership, strengthened through adversity, was unshakable. Peace had been restored, dignity reclaimed, and respect established. The family, in its new equilibrium, moved forward with lessons learned, hearts open, and relationships transformed by honesty, courage, and understanding. Emily knew, as she sipped her tea and glanced at David's supportive smile, that this was more than a personal victory. It was a testament to integrity, family loyalty, and the power of standing firm in one's values. The once oppressive shadow of Margaret's arrogance had lifted, replaced by a fragile but hopeful respect, a promise of a calmer, fairer, and more loving future.